host, yours truly, military medium. Today I have an extra special guest. Let me read just a little bit about him. Todd Robinson, his biography reads, is that he's a producer, a writer, known for The Last Measure back in, well, of course, this came out in DVD, but came out here in 2019. Known for The White Squall back in 96, Lonely Hearts in 2006. And also he's a musician, actor, originally from Pennsylvania, and pilot. And the list goes on. But welcome to the Red, White, and You Show, Todd.
Nice to be here. Thanks, Dean.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So share, before we get into your movie, I thought it would be great for folks to hear a little bit who Todd is and, you know, kind of your background, and then we'll get right into The Last Full Measure. But who is Todd Robinson?
I've been trying to figure that out for a long time. You know, I'm just an average guy. I happen to make my living in the storytelling trade. I've been making films for about 30 years. I'm a family man. I have two children who are grown now, who are also in the business along with my wife. And I come from, I suppose, your end of the world. I was born in Pennsylvania and went to school on the East Coast for drama, and eventually matriculated out to California, where the weather is wonderful and the business I wanted to be in is located generally. And, you know, I've been fortunate. I've worked with a lot of amazing people. I've been mentored by some of the greats. And this movie, The Last Full Measure, is something that was a passion of mine and my partner's for almost 20 years. It's the true story of the effort to secure a Medal of Honor for a forgotten hero during the Vietnam War, who gave his life saving over 60 soldiers whom he did not know. And when a story like this comes along, they tend to choose you as opposed to you choosing them. And this has just been a remarkable experience, mostly because of the veterans that I met along the way, who the story is really dedicated to and is about. So it's one of those projects that occasionally you come across that allows you to give back a little bit.
That's very cool, you know, hearing that. And, you know, what really struck me when I heard about the movie was, you know, first off, I was like, well, it intrigued me, number one, that it was a movie done about Vietnam, but number two, based on a true story. And that really drew me in and saying, we need to look further into this. And, you know, perhaps maybe it's something that they'd be willing to talk about, because telling, like you shared, Todd, is, you know, in that storytelling business of telling other people's stories. And obviously in this medium, it's you know, through film. And, you know, and it's interesting because, you know, kind of the backstory, it's all about Charlie Company that, they were doing Operation Abilene, correct, in Vietnam?
Correct. Operation Abilene was actually a large engagement that actually took place over about a month. It was a search and destroy mission that involved many different units from the Army. And on April 11th, 1966, Charlie Company, sorry about that,
Sorry.
the Big Red One, was it had come across a few North Vietnamese scouts. And so they were tasked to go into this just incredibly dense triple canopy jungle to try to find them, because they were trying to root out a unit called D-800, which was a battalion-sized, hardened Viet Cong force. And what happened is they went in as sort of the tip of the spear, and they were being flanked by two other companies, Alpha and Bravo. And as they got in and finally found them and engaged them, what no one knew was that embedded in this incredibly dense jungle were forests of bamboo. And so Alpha and Bravo Company could not get to Charlie Company. I've seen this bamboo. It's enormous. It's so dense and thick. And so it was really they were driven into a kill sack, what they called a kill sack, and it was all deliberate. and Charlie Company, who were short on men anyway, found themselves facing a hardened force of about 700 Viet Cong in bunkers in the trees, essentially surrounding them. And they were only about 134 strong. And they took almost 85% casualties by the end of the day. They lost 34 men. And in the middle of this melee, they couldn't. Their wounded couldn't be extracted because the Army helicopters didn't have winches, and there was just no place to land. And so the Air Force, hearing this on the radio, got together their pararescue units, their CSAR units, and they volunteered to go out there. And in the midst of this, they were dropping litters down into the firefight, and the Army guys were unfamiliar with how to load them, and so it became really dangerous. Guys were falling out of the litters practically, and so this young man, William Pitzenbarger, a pararescueman, volunteered to go down. And once on the ground, he just saw what terrible trouble these guys were in, and he triaged them, got about 12 of them onto the helicopters before the fighting got so intense that it became impossible to do that. And he was ordered back up onto his own helicopter and refused to go. He waved off his own helicopter, probably saving them as well. They ended up having to make an emergency landing. They had taken so much fire. And then he stayed there and continued his work and fought next to these men whom he did not know until he lost his life in the battle. And so what happened was then the Army guys put him up for the Medal of Honor. It went all the way up to the White House through McNamara and Johnson, and was kicked back down in 1966 as an Air Force Cross. And the veterans at the end of this were spit out all over the place, Guam, wherever they would go to sort of recover and recuperate. And they were unaware until the advent of the internet that Pitzenbarger had never gotten the medal. And so in the late 90s, they all sort of had these virtual reunions and realized that this hadn't happened, and found out that his dad was dying of cancer. And so what the movie is really about is these men coming together with a young Washington bureaucrat who is rather disinterested in this whole project at the beginning, and how he changes over the course of helping these men get the medal for Airman Pitzenbarger.
Well, did I read correctly? This film took 20 years to make?
Well, it didn't take 20 years to make. It took 20 years to get made, which is, the Hollywood's replete with these stories. There are, aspects of it that aren't tremendously commercial. It's not a Marvel movie, although we do have a lot of Marvel movie actors in it.
Right.
It's a serious drama. It's a piece of history. And it took a long time and it came together and fell apart, about 3 or 4 times, until finally a man named Mark Damon came along, who's a longtime veteran in the film business, and saw the merit in the film and was able to put the money together.
Nice. And talking about the budget, I think it took somewhere around 20 million to produce the movie. Is that about?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
that was just what somebody put on the internet. That's what I.
Nice try though. You know what I always say? I always say when asked these questions, it was almost enough.
It was almost enough there.
Because we never have enough resources. Making films is really a lessons in compromise. The original budget for the film that I wrote back in 2001 was about $40,000 and a 60-day shoot. And this was far less than that. And we shot it, my actual shooting days boiled down to about 26 days, which is ridiculous. I mean, we shot it in 3 different countries. It was, I don't even know how we did it. I don't want to work that way again if I don't have to.
Well, let's talk about a little bit. You were talking about some of the Marvel characters, but some of the actors that are actually part of the film. Sebastian Stan, Christopher Plummer, William Hurt with Ed Harris, and of course Samuel Jackson, Peter Fonda, Lindsay Hamilton, Jeremy Irving, Diane Ladd, Amy, is it Madigan?
Amy Madigan, yep.
There you go. And Linus
Roach.
There you go. John
Yep.
Savage, Allison Sudol, and Bradley Whitford. That's quite a list, and that's fairly short. I know there's so many more, but
yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches. It really is, and it was kind of a bucket list of actors that I wanted to work with. Anyway, I mean, some people don't get to work with that many people in a lifetime. Who I think we have 3 Academy Awards represented there. Oops, I turned my light off. We had 3 Academy Awards, and I don't know how many nominations and Golden Globes represented their Emmy Awards. I mean, it's really just a ridiculous cast. Christopher Plummer, is a legend. Actually, they're all legends. Ed Harris is as good as they come. Sam was amazing. I mean, all of them, and not to mention William Hurt, who's become a really close friend of mine. And it just doesn't get better than that. They make you look so good as a filmmaker when you get to work with people like that.
Nice. So, I think I had a battalion commander one time tell me, as a young non-commissioned officer, saying, you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, but make sure you surround yourself with the smartest or very talented people and they'll make you look really good, right?
Oh, yeah, there's no question. And the thing that's interesting about filmmaking from my point of view is because I'm a writer-director, I write it and then I direct the picture. Sure. I always say I have to fire the writer, once I go into directing mode, because you can't be precious about the material, because as a director, you're really sort of like the conductor of the orchestra. But the oboe player or the violin player will know if something's out of key or if there's a fingering that's not going to work for them. And the actors are like that. If there's a transition that somehow is difficult, or they see the melodies and the harmonies where I'm seeing the whole libretti. And so to work with people at that level, they come in and they connect that tissue for you and just make it so much more refined. And so you really can't be precious about the material. You have to let them take it and then participate in it. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I've been sitting here for like 7 weeks and nobody's called me. It's like,
well, we get things moving and shaking for you. We got
your
phone. Perfect. So it was so inspiring, and and the more I read about the movie, and really not just the movie but the backstory, right? It was more and more just going, holy crap, the odds that these guys were up against. And of course, Vietnam itself is riddled with battles that would completely blow your mind. But, in this particular battle that, Charlie Company was in, I guess the force that they were up against, and how do I want to say, the scenario, like you were talking about, the kill sack, I think you used, or I'd used the term kill zone, is saying that it was just a tremendous, how do I want to say, just a scenario that nobody would want to see themselves in. It was just mind-blowing that the odds that they were up against. Was there how many people was it ever, I guess, tallied the number of individuals that he saved during his course as a pararescueman during that battle?
Well, the number that gets thrown around is 60. Okay. But the thing about this battle that people familiar with our current wars might appreciate is, this wasn't like an urban setting. That's why we had to struggle to readjust our tactics and so forth when we've gone into these our more contemporary wars. There, it was very difficult for people to even be aware of where they were. later, I mean, they broke into a perimeter. It was sort of the idea that they were so embedded in this jungle. It was so dense that that they couldn't see each other. And so the one thing that they did all see, because they were able to all kind of look around and look up, was to see Pitsenbarger dropping into this battle. And the thing that, I'm not a military person, but I think I can understand this because I've been afraid before. I've had children sick before. I've had, things that seemed sort of overwhelming at times. And these guys thought they were going to die. I mean, they really believed it. And suddenly, out of the sky comes this guy in a clean uniform with blouse boots, and he kind of looks a little bit like a movie star coming down. And they're thinking to themselves, to a man, who is this guy? And he must be crazy, because as one of the veterans says, everybody there would have left if they could, and the one guy who could leave didn't. And so it really speaks to the career field of pararescue. And I can't help feel that there's a parallel and a connection in this moment when we're looking at all of our first responders, nurses, doctors, nurse practitioners, working with this COVID-19 thing and putting themselves in harm's way. And if you're a family member, or if you're someone who is suffering yourself, the fact that these people are there for you risking is such a beautiful thing to aspire to. In whatever way, we can do our part. And it doesn't have to be in this moment. It could be in any moment. And it's really why mythology celebrates people like Pitsenbarger over and over again, because we need to be reminded that service greater than self is something to be admired and is necessary if society is going to stay together.
Well, it's interesting, is I had the pleasure of working with some pararescue men in Alaska, and in obviously different generations, but still the persona of the mental fortitude of these individuals that run to the sound of battle, or march to the sound of the guns, so to speak. And those we used to say those guys were kind of crazy, and I so understand the mentality, and just putting others first above their own aspect. But you talk about as saying where these soldiers here, they've been in country for how long, were really scared. They thought they were really going to die, and saying that, where some of the veterans saying, if we could have left, we would have, like, we didn't have an option. And, it's interesting, as a former soldier myself, saying that, everybody gets scared. It's how they react in that, moment, and, what is their actions. And it's interesting because when we get down to it, regardless of whether you're a soldier or policeman, or doesn't matter if you're in, actor, actress, it doesn't matter. We're all human, and dealing with that fight or flight aspect. And here, these guys didn't have an option. It was fight or die type, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you mentioned Alaska, because a lot of the PJs say that you're not a PJ until you've served in Alaska, because that's some really interesting work up there.
They do, and some really interesting drops, very small drop zones.
Incredible work they do. But no, I think that's really the salient point, is how will we react under pressure? And it's just one of those things. I mean, the PJs are so highly trained, and it's embedded into their culture. I mean, they're probably special people to begin with in terms of what they're willing to do. That idea of running, into the burning building as opposed to running away from it.
Sure.
So they probably got that, and then they've got this high level of training. And yet there are still different levels of what people will do under that kind of stress. But I'll tell you, you look at any hotspot, any of the great stories that have come out of, Afghanistan, whether it's Roberts Ridge or whatever it is, there's always a PJ or two in the middle of it.
Yep.
They're just always there. And the thing is that, while they're trained to be lethal, and if they have to be, really their credo is these things we do that others may live, and they're really there to save life, not take life, if given the choice. And there's something, I don't know, it's almost like a little flower blooming in the middle of the desert,
Right.
in terms of the military and what the mission is. And for the moms and dads and wives and kids that are worrying about our fighting men and women overseas, it's really good to know that there are people like the pararescue community there, who will literally trade their life for yours if that's what it takes.
So share with us a little bit why, there's so many stories throughout, Vietnam and everything, but why this one story about, Airman Pitzenberger, why him?
Well, it's a good question, and the reason why him is really because he hadn't been given this award,
Sure.
and 30 years had passed. So for me as a filmmaker, the way that the story came to me was I had been hired by Warner Brothers to adapt a peacetime book called That Others May Live by Jack Brem, which is a great read, and but it was a peacetime story about pararescue. And while I was doing that, I was traveling through what they call it's their training syllabus, essentially. It's called the pipeline. And every place I went, the young airmen wanted to make sure I knew about this story about this guy named Pitzenbarger. So I heard the story of the Battle of Zai over and over again. And while I thought it was an amazing story and all of that, I didn't quite understand the relevance of it to me, or I didn't really want to make a movie just about a battle. And then it was upon going to Kirtland Air Force Base to see their graduation of this class I was following around, Mr. Pitzenbarger, the dad, was asked to speak. And when I heard him speak about the loss of his son and the things that he never got to see him do, and to see the pride and the loss sort of commingling in a very ill man, it made me flash back to when I was a boy and my dad and mom watching the Vietnam War play out on television, and realizing not until this moment while I'm listening to Mr. Pitzenbarger how deeply afraid they were that their son might get snatched up and drafted. And at that point, because I was really too young to fight in the war, it had gone badly, and you couldn't find a whole lot of purpose in it anymore. And then I flashed back on my own son, who was about 10 at the time, who this took so long, he ended up being my assistant on the movie. And again, the empathy that I felt was deep. And so it became clear to me that this was really not a war movie. It was a home front movie. And by intermingling and meeting these veterans and hearing story after story about what they endured that day, the trauma, the shame of what they were not able to do, maybe, and really witness firsthand the openness and the PTS and all of that, it just became clear to me that there was a story here to be told that was a little bit different. And I, on the side, I work with a charity called Save a Warrior, which is a group run by Jake Clark out of Ohio, Central Ohio, that we deal with veterans with suicidal ideation. And so in my other sort of world, I'm working on, within this topic as well. And it became clear also that this could speak to that as a metaphor, really. And so, like I say, it chose me, and it served a lot of things that I care about. So, here we are.
It's interesting you bring up that, your son ended up assisting you on the movie. Did that bring things full circle to you, as far as having your son assist you, and then also kind of, you were talking about Mr. Pitzenbarger, kind of the commencement speech at the class and everything, as far as you're kind of doing a movie about his son and everything. Did they kind of bring a full circle aspect, I guess, one point of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, right in my face. You'd have to be kind
Sure.
of a dingy not to not to realize,
Right.
that it was all sort of coordinated. But for me, the real reason I wanted my son to be my assistant, and I hope to have the same opportunity with my daughter, who's a terrific young producer, is I really wanted them to see the way that I lead. Because when you direct a film, you really, I mean, at some point when we were in Thailand, I had a crew of 300 people. And there are a lot of, just sort of cliches about, directors yelling and screaming at people. And I don't operate that way. In fact, honestly, I don't know too many people who do. But I wanted them to see that the best way to get a result was by respecting people and seeing them and making sure that you understood, that my son understood that this is my dream. It's not their dream. It's a job for them, and they have lives and wives and kids and problems and issues, and you have to learn how to coordinate all that when you're trying to get the best out of people. And it's interesting because all the leadership that I've been coordinating with to get the movie out, we've screened the movie at over 60 military establishments around the country. And whenever I meet, I'm talking about, lieutenant colonels and generals and people at that level, they're all people. They really care. They're dealing with. I met one of the guys who's the commanding officer, I guess, of SEAL Team 4 in San Diego. And I said, what do you spend most of your time on? And he said, marriage counseling, which shocked me. I thought he was going to tell me that, sniper school or something,
Right.
but he said, no, it's all about, HR kind of stuff. It's how do I keep these families supporting each other so that through that proxy, the mission is being supported. And the military is a vast and complex labyrinth of a million issues that the average person just doesn't even begin to understand. And I got a little bit of a glimpse at that and about the people that serve and what they care about. And it's just impressive. I wish more people understood what people who volunteer to go in harm's way are really doing for us, and who the people are that are taking care of them.
Well, and you bring that up. I think that movies such as yours and other, or what in my words, awareness films and projects that bring a deeper sense of awareness in different mediums, give those that maybe never had the opportunity to serve, a glimpse. You talk about that small window into saying, wow, I never knew, in fact, I was interviewing a sculptor the other day and talking about Vietnam and talking about dog handlers and saying, I didn't know that there was over 400 dogs euthanized. I was like, I didn't know that. And so, things that weren't privy, or maybe were just a blip in time, a kind of shining a spotlight, if you will, into an aspect of things for
Yeah,
folks.
for sure. The other thing that shouldn't be that we shouldn't neglect talking about is the stigma of the Vietnam War
Yeah.
in particular. I mean, part of the reason that your generation has been treated with at least more of the respect it deserves is because of how those men and women were treated. And one needs to remember a couple of things. One is that that the people that you hear about spitting on soldiers coming home and things, that those people were acting out of a deep sense of fear of going themselves, or of trying to act out in some form or fashion against the policies that they disagreed with. And unfortunately, they conflated the people who went, and again, in Vietnam, remember, many men and women, or certainly men, were yanked out of their lives, mostly people who didn't have the the ability or the influence to get out of it if they wanted to. And you're an 18-year-old kid, and you go off to boot camp, and a couple of months later you find yourself in an alien landscape shooting at people you're not mad at. And of course the war was just so screwed up on so many levels. And then they come back after having endured all that, and then had to endure, shame on the home front. And um, and so I think that part of the reason that we got this level of actors in the movie is because they all understand that, and they wanted to pay tribute to people that they knew, who were less fortunate than they, who came home, or some that didn't come home, and certainly the ones that did came back forever changed. The other point that I always want to mention is, having spent so much time across the country in the last 8 months or so, I was amazed at how many first generation immigrants to this country are in the military, and how many of them, some people are just trying to get their green card. And it's a heck of a thing to see these people wanting to serve this country because of how much they care about the opportunity that's been given to them. And for a lot of us, like my people have been in this country for at least, on my dad's side, probably 10 generations, and on my mom's side, at least 4. And we forget what it means to come to this country, and how much it offers to people. And so many of them go back and serve, and we should be grateful for that, because they're showing their gratitude for all of the opportunity that this country has to offer.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Todd, is that a lot of people don't even realize, even in today's society, I know things are changing, but there's a lot of people that serve in the current military that don't have a citizenship in the United States. And a lot of people don't realize, like, you can serve in the United States Army, Air Force, whatever. Yep, you can. You don't have to be a citizen. But if you want to subsequently go on to get a clearance or whatever, then you have to take out your citizenship. And it's interesting you bring that up, talking about country of origin or whatever. And a lot of people don't realize that. But going back, and not that we're going to get onto it, but going way back, you think of even back in the Civil War, right? Those Irish immigrants getting off the boat. Hey, go fight for go fight for your country. Now you're a citizen, go fight for your country. And they didn't have a choice. And so, yeah, the Vietnam was a completely a different, and the media too, right? Is like, now we have social media and everything is there. But, television brought the war into people's living
Homes.
rooms. Yeah.
For the
And
first
where they
time.
were,
Yeah.
real-time casualty rates, and they really didn't filter a lot of stuff.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because when I was a boy, I remember at the end of the news every night, we had a black and white Zenith TV, and it would always be on during dinner, which probably wasn't a great thing, but you watched the nightly news. And my parents watched Huntley and Brinkley. And at the end of that news, they would flash a card, like a video card, and it would be the killed and wounded on both sides. And it as a kid, I'm looking at it, I'm like going, oh, 3 Americans killed, 6 wounded, 50 Vietnamese killed, 200 wounded. And to look at that, it seemed to me pretty clear that we were winning the war. But that was that whole counting coup thing that McNamara had cooked up.
Right.
And there's a great book called What It's Like to Go to War. And in that book, they talk about how they counted the dead and wounded of the enemy. And many times, the Vietnamese, they pulled their men, their dead, off the battlefield, and they were never found. But there was always this political pressure on the military to count the dead, because that's what, at that point, Johnson needed to keep the war going, to keep it popular enough, to keep it going. And so, the whole thing was kind of, there wasn't a whole lot to believe in. And so, yeah, it was tricky business.
Right, for sure. I wanted to switch gears just a little bit, and kind of talk about, your background as a director and writer and musician. How long have you got, or how long have you been in the business? How long have you been doing what you do?
Well, everything. I mean, as a film director, this has happened for me really. I don't know, over the last 15 years, but I had to learn my craft, and I went to drama school. I mean, it really started in high school. I found a great teacher, a drama teacher who was just, it wasn't about what she was teaching. It was about the fact that she was a fantastic teacher who really instilled a sense of confidence in all of her students, and a feeling of purpose and being cared for. And I fell in love with the experience of putting on a play, frankly. And it's one of the two things that really make me love making movies, in spite of how desperately difficult it is. And that is that you get together with a group of people and you march forth in common purpose. And in that you form bonds, intense bonds that you just don't make in the normal world, as far as I can tell. And then often you get spit out and you never work with those people again, but it's kind of like, you always had Paris, and
Right.
it's just a powerful experience to have, to be inside that bubble, creating something. But I started really right in high school. I went to drama school. I was going to go to music school. I was going to go to Berkeley for guitar, jazz guitar, because it was the only place you could get an education in guitar in those days. And then I met this teacher, and it just turned me 90 degrees to the right. I ended up going to drama school, where I read all the great plays. I thought I wanted to be an actor. I don't even recognize that guy anymore. And then sort of as I was sort of struggling through that, I started to produce plays in Los Angeles. That's how I met my wife. And then I began to write. I was encouraged to write. It never even occurred to me to do that. And then apparently all that training that I'd had leading up to that made me, combined with a natural instinct to it, I suppose, made me a good enough writer that I started to make a living at it. And then, one of my very first movies was White Squall, that you had mentioned, that was directed by Ridley Scott, who's one of the greatest living directors. And I sort of entered in the business pretty high. And I was mentored by him and people like Sidney Pollack and Shaker Kapoor, and just some phenomenal people. And I sort of got to look over their shoulder at what they were doing. And, it was catching. And so I started directing my own work, and here we are.
Excellent. I got to ask, how did you get into the love of flying and aircraft? Do we call it a side hobby?
Yeah. I'm a really passionate, amateur, I guess you would say. It's funny. This actually goes back to a moment in my life that I always remember. I was a young man. I was probably 14 or 15 years old. I had hair down to here and pimples, and I wanted to be. All I wanted to do was play the guitar and chase girls. That's all I was interested in. And my mother was a career counselor, and she made me take an interest test. And the two things that popped up on the interest test were music, which was easy, and aviation popped up. And that was like, I don't know where it came from. And she said, go see so-and-so down the street. He's in the Air National Guard. He's a navigator. You should go talk to him. And so I stumbled down to this guy's house, and I sat there, and he kind of took one look at me and went, I don't think so. I don't think you got it, kid. And so I kind of left, and I gave it up. I just gave up on the idea entirely. And years later, when I was out here struggling to be a writer, I had a little job at UCLA down in Santa Monica. I took care of a building for them. And I got to sit there and stare out the window while I was writing screenplays. It was a pretty great job for that. And I would just watch all day long these little airplanes flying over. And I finally asked somebody, what's with all the airplanes? And they said, oh, well, they're flying out of Santa Monica Airport. And I said, Santa Monica has an airport? And they said, yeah. And by the way, for $25, you can go there and they'll take you for a ride and let you fly the airplane. And I'm like, no way. And they're like, yeah. And I was making $6 an hour. And but I got $25 because I have a credit card. So for lunch that day, I went down there and I got in a Cessna with some kid who was younger than me, and I have been paying ever since. And it just like got a hold of me. But that led me to eventually, it's a long story that I won't bore you with, but I eventually started to run into guys that were former military, because I own a plane called a Marchetti, which is a military trainer. And just through the internet and whatever, I met these guys, and I ended up becoming trained up to do ACM, air combat, dogfighting. We fly Russian Yaks. And it's the most dynamic, challenging, physically, mentally thing that I've ever done. But here are these guys who are flying Phantoms and F-14s and F-18s and training me. I'm getting their watered down education that they were paid millions of dollars to do, or we paid millions of dollars to get them.
Right.
And so it's just been the true joy of my life to fly with these guys. So,
well, one of the reasons, I mean, obviously that's a big passion of yours, but it was interesting because has that segued into kind of really adding a tool to your director's toolbox? Like, if there's an aspect of aircraft within, say, a movie or whatever you're writing, does those wheels start turning? And as far as what you can do?
100%, but that's the easy part. I mean,
Yeah.
I just happen to understand technically
Right.
what makes airplanes fly, and I understand the nomenclature and the jargon and
Sure.
the culture of it. But the real interesting thing about flying with these guys is there's an initiation process. And you've heard, Maverick is Tom Cruise's call sign in Top Gun,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Well, you never get a call sign like Maverick. You get a call sign like dumbass, because it's almost exclusively for doing something dumb.
Sure.
And I was given a call sign eventually, which is a great rite of passage. And there's a whole culture of people out there that don't even barely know me by my real name. They only know me by my call sign. And that call sign I didn't really like. And because I finally was caught in the act of being myself, and thus it inspired the call sign, which I will just share with you is Sandy. And I got that because occasionally it's like sitting in the sand without your underwear. Occasionally I get a little sand, where the sun don't shine, and I'm not a lot of fun to be around when that happens. So that's how I got that call sign. But the thing that was amazing about it was that it really made me reflect on myself, because I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that cranky guy. And so I now embrace and love that because it always reminds me of something that was really being observed about me that wasn't so great. And it gave me the opportunity to work on that and develop that. And beyond that, I got to really learn the culture of leadership and a true, sort of love affair with men. Because we need to spend time with each other apart from our spouses and things, because there's something special that happens there. There's a communication that's unique between men, especially men who've shared common experience. And to be invited into that has been amazing. And then to be able to take that into my world as a director and try to use those leadership skills with my different departments, and understand that you can't jump over the chain of command, that there's a reason that things need to flow a certain way, or you have chaos. And there's no way that being a creative guy, I mean, I was never going to go to a leadership clinic for like business people or anything. And they don't teach you that part. So I was very fortunate to run into these guys who have now been in my life for many, many years, because they really gave me tools for navigating really tough situations.
Very interesting. That's I just love the dynamic of it, and I love how it flows almost seamlessly, right, in between the different aspects of your life, and how you're able to use that as needed, or it fuels you, right? So let me ask you just one last question, kind of in closing. I'm really curious, who is or I should say, let me rephrase that. Who is someone that has inspired you in doing the work that you do? And maybe there's
Wow.
not there. Maybe there's more than one, but
These are great questions. I usually get the same four questions. This is really great. Um, well, I'll tell you a quick event that happened to me when I was in college. I was doing what's called summer stock theater, which is regional theater. And I was in Colorado, and they were really beating us up. We were working 7 days a week for about 6 weeks before we got a day off. And on that day off, I just said, I got to go to a movie. And I went to a movie, and it was a little college movie theater, and it was a double bill. I didn't know what I was going to see. I just needed to go see anything. And I saw Days of Heaven, and I saw The Duelist. And they're two of the most exquisitely visual movies ever made. And Ridley Scott directed The Duelist. And your audience will love it, by the way. It's about two guys fighting a duel over 20 years, Harvey Keitel and David Carradine, during the Napoleonic Wars. And it was just truly amazing. And I staggered out of there thinking, I don't know what I just saw. I thought I was going to be an actor at that point, but I thought I need to be part of that. And so, less than 10 years later, Ridley Scott was directing my first film. And so, I would say that Ridley's had a profound influence on me, not only because he's been so successful, but because of where he comes from. He started out as a visual artist, as a painter, and he was able to. That's how he visualizes things, and how he's been able to take that and then extrapolate on that, and end up creating these incredible images. Whereas I kind of went a more literary route, but I stood on his hip, and just I'm still in touch with him all these years later, and it's just amazing when you get to work with people like that just have such a I mean, he's forgotten more about filmmaking than I'll ever know, and there are a lot of people like that I've had the opportunity to work with. So I would say Ridley's right at the top of the list for all of those reasons.
very cool. Very cool. It's always interesting to me is, who's the inspiration and why. And sometimes it's not even what you think it was. I remember one time we had a director on, and it was in the art world, and it was interesting because I was like, wow, you wouldn't even expect that one, but it's very inspiring and it's very cool. So Todd, let me ask you, if folks want to go out, check out more about The Last Full Measure, where can they do that?
It's everywhere. You can get it on iTunes, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Netflix, you name it. You can find it there. We're in the pay-per-view mode right now. Although I guess Netflix, if you're subscribed, you can see it. It's also available on Blu-ray at all the brick and mortar places like Walmart, Target, those kind of places. And of course, you can order them online as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the Blu-ray release was just on April 21st. Was that correct?
Yeah, last Tuesday. Yeah.
Yep. So that was.
We were in theaters. I think we opened January 12th, and so we were around the country in movie theaters. And now we're sort of in that second wave, and we were really lucky to miss this COVID thing because people actually had the opportunity to see it in theaters, and now everybody's sitting at home. So it's a good time if it didn't come to your town, to see it now.
Well, if you guys haven't gone and seen it, myself included, I'm going to correct that today. But make sure you guys run out and I was looking at it, and the prices to rent a movie is, I think it's like $5 or whatever on Amazon. So it's not expensive at all. So make sure you correct that and check it out. But Todd, thanks so much for being a guest today on the Red, White, News Show. It's been an honor chatting with you, and we look forward to connecting with you here in the future and seeing what The Last Full Measure continues to do in the box office.
Thanks, Dean. The honor is mine. I appreciate you taking the time.
You bet.